Module 5, Fleshing it out. Audiences are often a little skeptical about your speaker's message, especially if the speaker is addressing a controversial issue. You can build credibility with an audience by using reliable sources of information and backing up your statements with citations to trusted authorities. You need to think about your presentation as though it was going to be written down on paper and distributed throughout the audience and their bosses. Throwaway lines which you assumed would just pass over people's heads will end up being the bits that certain people remember. So be sure to keep a close eye on what you say and how you say it. Often, people make the mistake of believing that the more they say, the better their speech is. Others, feeling that brevity is the soul of wit, keep what they say to a minimum. As with so many things, the truth lies somewhere in between, and the key to making a presentation as powerful and as well received as it can be is to say enough and make what you say mean enough. There is no point in fleshing out a presentation with extraneous detail which no one will remember, and at the same time you should avoid leaving out anything remotely important so that your message is strong, coherent, and memorable. Identifying appropriate sources. The internet supplies us with an endless stream of information, but how reliable is it? One way to evaluate reliability is to compare data from several different sources. One way to check for bias, especially with controversial topics, is to compare statements by people who have opposing views. For people who wish their words to be given attention and taken seriously, balance is of vital importance. Maintaining that balance relies on good research and not allowing your opinion to be mistaken in your mind for fact. There is so much information available for research, and your task is to separate the redundant, excess information from the important data. For example, many people use the popular online encyclopedia Wikipedia for research. This is not a bad idea. The site is filled with information which is well cross-referenced and constantly updated. In terms of freshness, online encyclopedias such as this cannot be beaten by the traditional paper-based form of encyclopedia, which in turn are incredibly inconvenient for the purposes of cross-reference. So if there is this much convenience to an online encyclopedia and so much information therein, we should be looking to use it for all of our research needs, should we not? Well, in fairness, using an online resource like Wikipedia can be a very good way to do substantial research, but it is important to make sure that any facts and figures you use from a Wikipedia article are cited and backed up by other sources. You will find the citation reference in square brackets next to the information in the article body. This links to the table of references, which can be used to find the source that the statistics or other information were drawn from. The more sources you have for information, and the more views you listen to from both sides of a debate, the better for any research that you do. Even if you disagree with the information and opinions given by a certain source, it can, after all, be used as a jumping-off point for a counter-argument. Establishing credibility. It is extremely important to be sure of your facts. If you make even one factually incorrect statement, some people will doubt everything you say. This is something that holds true wherever you are, including in some of the highest courts in the land. A lawyer will be much in demand if he or she can take one small inaccuracy in a witness's statement and turn it to the advantage of his or her client by using it to paint the witness as unreliable. In terms of a presentation, the stakes may not be as high, but all the same, it is wise to make sure that you have authority behind what you tell people. This begins with how you present yourself. It is often said that you cannot judge a book by its cover, and the truth is that it's absolutely correct. Some fine minds are to be found behind faces which appear to many people to suggest docility. But if you want to keep the audience's attention on what you are saying, it is advisable to appear businesslike and efficient at all times. You should be tidily dressed and should be aware at all times of what you have just said, what you are currently saying, and what you will say next. If this involves referring to flashcards on occasion, then there is no problem in doing so. Much better to have the information on hand than have it disappear from your mind. It is also worth bearing in mind the fact that the audience have not come to be told things that they already know. If they had, then any one of them could be giving the presentation. It is much better to think about things from another angle. You know what they think, so some of this presentation can be about what you think. The bits of the presentation that they remember may well be the moments when their opinions were challenged and potentially changed. Doing this will involve arguing a point and backing it up with sound reasoning, facts, and figures, and the impact it has on an audience can be genuinely impressive. You should use whatever is at your disposal to make your points in a presentation as efficiently as possible. Known statistics, testimonies from respected individuals, and documentary evidence are all extremely helpful when it comes to making your point effectively. Each person in the audience may have a different convincer. The more complete your presentation is, the more people you will convince. Unless you are preaching to the converted, do not assume that you will carry all before you with the same arguments that sounded right to you. The importance of citations. Some groups or individuals are so trusted that citing their statements can be the deciding factor in getting people to agree with you. Some examples: the Centers for Disease Control, the Congressional Budget Office, the Census Bureau, the Journal of the American Medical Association. The point that unites these groups listed above and others like them is that they are considered to be a leading authority in their specific field. When it comes to discovering information on any subject, going right to the leading authorities to find it out is always a sensible move. If you are giving a presentation, going to a leading authority in the area you wish to discuss is very wise indeed. Sometimes in a presentation, you will find that some of your listeners are skeptical and will challenge the statistics you mention. If you can mention that those statistics have come from a leading authority and cite that they are up to date as well, then you will advance your case much further. It has become common practice to begin sentences in presentations, essays, and speeches with the phrase, "Everybody knows that," or "It goes without saying that," when often this is very far from being the case. This is a rhetorical device which can be used appropriately and inappropriately. In the first case, if it is something everyone does know, then it prevents you from having to go over well-worn explanations. In many other cases, however, it may be used because the speaker has not been able to source direct proof for an assertion and simply wants their audience to accept it. After all, if everybody knows something, not many people will happily be the one to disagree. When it comes to backing your points up, it is best that you go to the experts. The more evidence you can back up a statement with, the more confidence you can have in asserting it. Furthermore, the fact that the information comes from a trusted source means that you can immediately trump skeptical listeners who wish to make your presentation seem less informed than it is. Module 6, Putting it all together. Once you've outlined your speech and lined up some solid evidence to back up your ideas, it's time to put all the pieces together. Whether you plan to write out your speech word for word or just speak from notes, you need to have a clear idea of what you want to say, the actual words, not just the ideas. It is generally recommended not to have everything you want to say written down, but rather a series of prompts. If you appear to be reading from a script, then there is less chance of you getting your point across with the power that you want it to have. Nonetheless, you should refrain from improvising too much, as there are clear disadvantages to this process, not least of them the fact that this is filled with risks, such as momentarily being lost for words. This makes you appear less competent, and people will be less likely to take you seriously. The general impression is that you should have in mind the body of what you want to say, and any additions which occur to you can always be included. Therefore, you do not have to worry about deviating from a pre-written speech, while also avoiding the dangers of having nothing to say. Writing your presentation. Most of the time, it's a bad idea to read a presentation word for word. It's boring and makes it difficult to build a rapport with the audience. Any presentation is a kind of social occasion. If you just wanted people to hear what you have to say, you could print copies of your presentation and hand them out. Effective speakers try to make a connection with their audience. Reading a speech word for word creates a barrier between the speaker and the audience and eliminates spontaneity. Your audience should feel like you're having a conversation with them, not lecturing them. If you are constantly referring to notes, this makes it impossible to maintain any kind of eye contact with your audience, and you may as well record the speech and play it to them. Speaking from notes does not have the same problems connected with it. It simply allows you to have prompts from which to elaborate. The main benefit to making a speech is that you allow your words to come alive. Some of the most impressive speeches are made by speakers who have minimal notes and have thought long and hard about what they want to say and how they want to say it. This allows them to maintain a rapport with their audience and gives the words more resonance. Also, if you are reading from a full speech, this makes it more difficult to respond to questions which may arise in the course of your presentation. Allowing your brain to do most of the work sharpens your reaction times and gives you greater credibility. If you wish to write out any part of your speech or memorize it word for word, the best thing to do is write down what you will say in the first 2 or 3 minutes of the speech. From here, you can usually gain the confidence that you require to give the rest of your speech more freely. By this point, you will have gained the confidence of your audience, who will be happy to hear what you have to say, and you will be warmed up, making the rest of the speech far more coherent and convincing. Adding a Plan B. It is almost inevitable that at some point you will encounter unexpected problems in giving presentations. How you handle these problems will determine whether your presentation is a success or not. Some people get very flustered when something goes wrong. They may become irritated or angry. The audience picks up on this emotion and starts to form a negative impression of the speaker. Skillful speakers treat unexpected problems humorously. If their projector doesn't work or they trip over a cord, they make a joke out of it. This puts everyone at ease and starts to build a rapport with the audience. This is one element which separates comfortable public speakers from speakers who are less professional. The importance of having a plan B is recognized by everyone who has a plan A. The thing that many people forget about plans is that they are not always going to be carried out in the conditions for which they were planned. Things can go wrong without notice. Even if you have planned out every seemingly foreseeable eventuality, there is always the danger that, for example, the power will go off in the middle of the presentation. How you react to these problems is almost as important as the quality of your speech. Good public speakers will always be ready for the possibility of unforeseen problems. This does not mean that, should you spill something over your notes or have a momentary lapse of memory, you should launch into a stand-up comedy routine. It is much better to simply go into the speech you have planned with the awareness that you may need to fill space. One way in which people do this is to make light of the problem and, if you can think of a way to do so, make the unexpected problem into part of your plan B. For example, and this is a very specific example, if the power should cut out during a speech on the importance of energy efficiency, you can turn this into a jumping-off point by saying, and this is a good example of the importance of what I'm talking about. Thank you very much for that illustration. Of course, sometimes the fates will throw problems at you that are not so easily turned into a joke, but thinking on your feet will win you points. Often, it is enough simply to know that you may encounter such problems, and to have an attitude those things are in the lap of the gods. Having the confidence to turn them into something that can drive a presentation forward is the mark of a good speaker. Reviewing, editing, and rewriting. Here are some things to look for in reviewing the first draft of a presentation. Content and organization. Does the opening provide a good idea of what the presentation is about? Are the main ideas arranged in a logical order? Are opinions backed up with facts, statistics, and authorities? Language. Have you come with clear, effective statements of your main ideas? Have you eliminated jargon as much as possible? Have you used vocabulary that the audience will understand? Length. Have you devoted an appropriate amount of time to each part of your presentation? Is your entire presentation an appropriate length? Very few first drafts are good enough to be the draft. Unless you have immense clarity of thought and eerie foresight, the chances are that you will make a reference later on in your speech that either contradicts something you said before, or has a meaning that is not immediately clear to your listeners going on the basis of what you said before. The first draft of a speech is about getting all your ideas onto the page and ensuring that they are coherently presented. The further drafts will be about ensuring that the speech flows like it should and sounds like a complete document rather than a series of thoughts. Writing a speech that takes all the important factors into account first time is not impossible, but does take an inordinate period of time, and the final document can often sound like pages of research. Getting the balance right between informative content and something that will hold the attention of your audience generally requires you to revisit the speech after you have written it. You could sit to write with a reference book in front of you, checking every fact, figure, and quote before you commit it to paper. However, this approach almost always leads to a speech that has very little life in it. The best bet is to write a draft of the speech that sounds like something you would say. The latter drafts of it will then take into account the details that you have checked and any amendments you have made as a result of the read-through. It may be that in the original draft you have given more time to one section than you have to another, equally important section. By adding and subtracting elements, you will have a speech that sounds coherent and impressive. By sitting and working on a first draft that takes everything into account and has all the important facts and figures checked, you will have a speech that sounds like a research document. Module 7, Being Prepared. Preparation serves several important purposes. It boosts your self-confidence, it reduces the chances of something going wrong, it creates an impression of you as a competent, diligent person, it makes it easier for you to give a polished, professional presentation. It is often said that those who fail to prepare to fail. The reason for this is that only by preparing properly will you eliminate the obvious potential errors that can turn what would be an excellent speech into a mess. By taking the time to prepare, you can look ahead to the presentation and get an impression for how it should and will go. It will also allow you to take into consideration what difficulties may arise and have a strategy for dealing with each of them. Some people can walk into a room and hold the attention of their audience by speaking off the cuff for half an hour or more. These people are naturally gifted and quite rare. Usually they make a living as stand-up comedians, as comedy is one of the very few fields where the act of preparing a routine is not hamstrung by the necessity for getting every fact right and every detail nailed down. This does not mean that delivering a presentation cannot be an enjoyable process. In fact, the right amount and the right kind of preparation can ensure that the presentation is enjoyable, informative, and useful both for you and for your audience. Checking out the venue. Here are some things to look for when checking out the venue for a presentation. Adequate seating. Good sight lines. Some chairs may need to be moved so that everyone can see the speaker or the screen. Projectors or other equipment. If you will be using the site's projector, be sure it works and check to see if it is compatible with your laptop. Will you need an extension cord? Lighting. What combination of lights will allow the audience to see you, their notes, and the screen if you plan to use slides? Speakers' accommodations. Is there a podium if you plan to use one? Is there a place for you to put handouts? Miscellaneous. Where are the restrooms and emergency exits? Sometimes a lot of preparation goes into a presentation, taking into account the way the speaker moves, sounds, and sees the audience, as well as the visual aids the speaker will use during the course of the presentation. A great deal of preparation should ensure that things go smoothly, but the level of presentation needs to be matched by the quality of preparation. Think for a moment how you would react if you had written a 30-minute presentation which called for frequent references to a visual slideshow, and when you arrived at the venue you found that they did not have a projector. If you can have access to the venue before you deliver the presentation, this should allow you to carry out a study of the room and get all the information you need. If you can have access for long enough to do a dry run, so much the better, as this will allow you to foresee any problems and either amend your speech or make alternative arrangements. It is essential that you take nothing for granted when seeking to deliver a presentation, because it will be you who is in the unenviable position of explaining and dealing with any problems that happen during the live presentation. If you cannot get access to the venue prior to your presentation, then you should at least be able to get a floor plan of the venue and a checklist of items you will have available to you, as well as knowing whether the venue will support any equipment you bring with you. If you have written into your presentation a very clever 10-minute scenario that requires you to walk among the audience, you will need to know that the layout of the room allows this. If you have included a short film in your presentation, it will be entirely useless if most people cannot see the film because a pillar is in their way. Then, before you deliver your presentation, you should look around the room and ensure that nothing there will distract people from what you are saying, and visualize how you will deliver your speech in this room. Gathering materials. If you are going to use handouts, be sure you have enough. Handouts serve several purposes. Listeners like to take notes. Listeners like to have something to take away from your presentation as a reminder of what you said. Many listeners will take notes on any scrap of paper that is handy. By providing your listeners with handouts, you can reduce the time they spend taking notes because they will already have the main information you are presenting. The less time they spend taking notes, the more time they can spend focusing on you. Handouts help reinforce your main points. People listen selectively. As hard as you try to emphasize a particular point, some listeners will remember some other point you made that was probably less important. Handouts will help you drive home your main message. Handouts make listeners happy. People like to take away something tangible from a presentation, something more than their recollection of what you said. Giving people handouts makes them feel as if they own the information they have just heard. When you write your speech, it is beneficial to condense what you are saying into its key points. This is beneficial for the sake of having visual prompts for what you are going to say, but can actually serve a dual purpose. If you condense a speech into its key points and other useful information, then in this form or in a slightly amended one, it can make an excellent handout. As wonderful as your speech may be, remember that it will be experienced slightly different by however many people hear it. All of these people may take something slightly different away from the room. So if you have absolutely concrete points that you would insist on them remembering, ensure that these are available on the handout. By giving everyone a handout, you also ensure that they feel as though they have participated in the presentation. Rather than simply demanding that they sit there, listen, and remember everything you have said, you give them what is in effect a souvenir of the occasion. In fact, souvenir is by origin a French word for to remember. This will be something they can refer back to after the event, particularly if they annotate the handout themselves with their own thoughts or something specific that you said during the presentation. Additionally, this allows them to sit and listen to your presentation as you deliver it, without having to constantly write and refer back to detailed notes during the speech. A 24-hour checklist. Presentation. Do you know what you're going to say in the first 2 minutes? Do you know how you're going to introduce your topic? Have you prepared clear statements of your main points? Do you know how you're going to close the presentation? Have you prepared answers for the questions that are likely to come up? Slides and handouts. Have you proofread your slides? Do you need to add any slides? Should you delete any slides? Do you have enough handouts for everyone? Logistics. Do you know where you're going and how you're going to get there? Have you gathered all the equipment and other materials you need? Have you called a contact person to make sure the room will be ready?